This strategy helped Steve and Sally increase their stable lifetime income from less than 50% to more than 80%. Let's discover exactly how and explore the impact this is going to have on their retirement. Coming up. Welcome back. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Steven Spicer, and if you've had a chance to read my book, you know that I'm a fan of sources of stable lifetime income. And I think part of the reason that this hit number one on the Wall Street Journal's best-selling list had to do with the fact that many of you too are struggling to find a better way to invest and see value in income stability, something that mainstream advice often just ignores in favor of mindlessly just putting it all in a stock and bond only portfolio. I touch on several strategies for overcoming the major flaws in that traditional passive stock and bond, head in the sand, cross your fingers and pray for the best approach. But for the most part, the book focuses on understanding the problems and only briefly touches on those solutions. To be honest, I'm still sifting through all of that for clients. I don't have it all perfected myself. One solution I mention in the book, I refer to it as the lazy man's way to achieve income stability, is to just pay for it. That might sound like the most expensive way to do it. It is, but often that's how things in life are. You could pay for a professional to build your house, or you could put in a whole lot of time trying to do it yourself, hope for the best in order to save some money. Now, when it comes to income stability, you can do that through an annuity. And full disclosure, I actually, as I fully explained in this video, used to really hate annuities. As I was writing this book, I still wasn't a huge fan, but I could acknowledge it as an option to help people overcome some of the massive risks we explore in there. Well, come to find out, after years of research since publishing, not all annuities are created equal. Some are the garbage that I used to think pretty much all of them were. Many are. But some are actually pretty decent for growth even. Some are great for providing the flexibility of insurance type benefits later in life. And some are really good at providing a guaranteed stream of income. Some are just way better at that than others. And most of them offer a 0% floor, meaning they can't lose money, making them a great conservative piece of some retirees' portfolios, no matter which of those functions that I just mentioned end up being the most important to them. Instead of just mindlessly shoving clients' money into bonds, which many investors don't really understand anyway, but most advisors recommend without a second thought. There are absolutely risks with annuities, as there are with anything. Things that you need to have top of mind if you are considering one, and we'll dive into those in a bit. But first, this video specifically is about what an income-focused annuity was able to do for Steve and Sally here. So here's what their financial picture looked like when we first started talking. On the surface, it looks pretty good. There was a lot of work to be done though. They were way overexposed to a single, his employer's, stock. They had no tax-free accounts yet, and no chaos hedge to speak of, a concept that I introduce in this video. Let me know in the comments if you'd like to see a deep dive into any other aspects of this plan. But for this video, we're just focusing on that one small digestible piece of it, that part about the income. Here's what you should know for context. They are very conservative. They do not want to lose money in the market. They had a terrible experience with a mainstream advisor just regurgitating all the same industry jargon, as they all seem to do, ultimately losing the couple a lot of money in the crash of 2008. Steve here is 62 and ready to retire. He just wants to know if he can take what he has and securely provide himself and his wife with an income of at least $100,000 per year. They are in a great position to make this happen and have a lot of options. But before he retires from his 30+ year career, they have concerns about what the future might hold for the market. As I think anyone in their right mind probably should have. Anyway, we explored a lot of different options for them, but one of them really stood out. They said that it really spoke to many of their concerns, and that was the impetus for me wanting to share this with all of you. Long story short, we're using the accounts other than Steve's 401k to take care of their short-term income goals. And then we took Steve's $761,000 401k and turned it into a guaranteed income stream of $105,000 per year starting in 10 years that would last for as long as either Steve or Sally is alive. Now, this was not done with just any old annuity. We're accomplishing this through the annuity that, with all my research thus far, I have found to be the best at achieving future, as in 10 or so plus years out, income goals. This particular one is a fixed index annuity, so there is a chance that the account value could grow to more than this, allowing for an even greater payout, but we're not counting on that. We always like to be overly conservative with any projections like these. The $105,000 figure that I mentioned is their low-end guarantee. And at almost 14% of the initial contribution here, for an income starting at age 72 on a man whose parents are both still alive and going strong at around 90, that's pretty good. To be clear, they don't have to turn on that income if they later change their mind. They can always just withdraw that account value and it will have been a fine conservative investment with its 0% floor, i.e. never having a down or negative year. And one more quick note before we explore what this will do for them in various future extreme scenarios. I believe everyone should thoroughly stress test their retirement plans. There are definitely some options that would project out the possibility for way more than this. For example, we explored with Steve and Sally one flexible option that on the high end was projecting that it might be able to provide them with an income of greater than $200,000 per year after year 10. But on the low end, the guaranteed amount was just under $43,000 per year. The reality 10 years from now will likely fall somewhere in between. I suppose it could be higher than the 200,000, but let's assume somewhere in between. But for this couple, as conservative, not risk takers, the guarantee of the $105,000 per year was definitely worth exploring. So let's explore that, shall we? Let's jump behind the screen and see how much of a difference this one recommendation for just a piece of this client's overarching portfolio makes for the peace of mind this couple can have in their financial future. All right, so here they are, all their information has been plugged in. You can see their different sources of income in retirement. This is if they were to retire now, they're both about 62, and then through age 90, what their financial situation would look like. So he's making an income here, he wants to retire at the end of the year, and then his other source of income are from a rental account, a rental house that he has. Doesn't want it to go up with inflation. His son is staying in one of them, so he doesn't want to account for any increases in the future. So just $24,000 a year coming from netting from his rentals. Then he also has Social Security that will be turned on in the future. We'll probably do some, we've discussed doing some Roth conversions in this time. That's not important for this particular case study. But if you look at these other withdrawals, so he's pulling from his accounts in order to fund his lifestyle and at some point in order to fund his required minimum distributions. Right, so this is the baseline scenario if everything performs as it has on average in the past. This is what it'll look like. He'll look great. But they came to me specifically because I like to stress test things. I like to push the limits because I want to make sure that my clients are taken care of no matter what. I want to make sure they're in the best position that they possibly can be in because I don't know what the future holds. And I'm not trying to scare anyone. I certainly don't think I'm not saying that I think it's likely that there'll be a massive crash in the future, but I do know that there's a non-zero probability. And so I want my clients to be prepared for that. So let's look at what if we have a bad decade followed by slow growth. So this is just a historically bad decade. So as in not worse than one that we've had in the past in our United States markets, just similar to other bad decades that we've had, right? And something worse than that is absolutely possible. And that's something I talk about in the book. This is not just because it hasn't happened before doesn't mean it can't happen in the future. In fact, we're constantly setting records for how fast the market moves and how much it falls and how long it stays down. We just don't know exactly what the future holds. And so we want to be prepared for a lot of different scenarios. So let's look at that historically average bad decade followed by slow growth. It would come up rather short, and this is where the less than 50% income stability comes in. They would like to have much more than this to be able to fund their lifestyle, today's equivalent of roughly $100,000 per year. They have their Social Security that's supporting some of it, but it's not near enough to support their lifestyle, a relatively modest lifestyle today. So they fall quite a bit short. Obviously, not where they would want to be. This probably won't happen, but this is certainly within the realm of possibility that they experience a bad decade of growth within the first decade of their retirement. And if that happens, then it's going to have a significant impact on their future income. We can look at a couple others. These charts start to look very similar. If the Fed, has a Fed adverse scenario followed by modest growth, if we have a 0% return, we don't assume any return, it's a similar scenario. Here's one that I don't think many advisors look at, but I want to look at what if a 1989 Japan market happened in the United States. If you're not familiar with that, I talk about it in the book. It's just an example of how things that have never happened before can happen, even in developed markets like Japan's. Things were going well in the 80s. Market was up significantly. It was euphoric. Everything was going well. Market kept climbing. Real estate market kept climbing. Stock market, everything. And then in December 1989, it peaked, and it didn't reach its low until 2009. So it took 20 years to reach its low, about an 80% drop. That would be painful for anybody who went into retirement. We've never experienced anything quite like that. And it took more than 30 years for it to reach new highs. I don't foresee anything like that happening. I'm not trying to forecast that. I know that our scenario in the United States today is very different than theirs. It's always different. But we do have a lot of problems. They had problems. Who knows how the future is going to play out as far as financial markets go, and how that's going to affect each individual retirees' portfolios. And so that's what we want to be prepared for. So if something like this happened, again, something worse than this could happen, but if something like this happened, this is what it would do to their retirement. That would be devastating. And this is not what I want for my client. Luckily, they have their Social Security, but to have to only be able to rely on Social Security to take care of them, that would be painful. They, of course, don't want that. They have options. They have some real estate they could sell. They're in a better position than other people. But like I said, their son is living in one of those properties. They don't want to have to sell those things. They don't want to have to rely on that. So that's why we started exploring different options that they might have. So let's go back to this baseline and let's turn on that annuity scenario that we talked about. So up until this point, we've had the 401k invested in a traditional stock and bond only portfolio. Let's take that 401k out of the stock and bond only portfolio, so it's not growing in the market anymore, and put it into the particular annuity that we've been talking about in this video, the one that is going to guarantee the $105,000 per year after 10 years for the rest of their life. So if we make that one change, so obviously they were fine either way with the baseline scenario, but you can see that income coming on here that significantly helps them in retirement. And so we can look at different scenarios, and they may run out of some of this money up here, but at least they know. Yeah, so this bad decade, they do run out of money. They don't have quite as much as they would have wanted, but at least they know that they have this guaranteed income that is going to provide 81.5% of what they would like to have in retirement. They've obviously felt much better about that scenario. Fed adverse scenario, similar. It definitely wipes out their accounts sooner, but they know they have that guaranteed income stream. The flat zero, of course. Now the 1989 Japan scenario takes them out even before we get to that point. So that is painful, and we talked about this. And so they felt comfortable with the risk that if something like this did happen and they ran out of money early, that at least they would be able to take comfort in the fact that in a few years they could turn on that guaranteed income stream and then have that, knowing that that's coming in every single year for the rest of their life as a source of comfort to them, while most people would probably be devastated in this scenario. So that's the income side of things, which is a very important consideration in retirement. Let's look at what this does to your assets, because you might be saying, well, okay, if we take $761,000 out of the 401k, out of the market, and put it into this annuity, you don't have that growth over there at the same level that you could have had it been, in the market, right? I mean, it might be growing in the annuity, but it's much more conservative. It's going to be growing, absolutely going to be growing less unless you have some major crash, because the annuity is not subject to that downside. So yes, if the market continues to soar, if it has even historically average numbers, then we can see that with all those assumptions, which we know that, the one thing we know is that it's not going to be exactly like this, but with historically average assumptions, with the same cost of living assumptions throughout retirement, that by pursuing this annuity strategy, this income strategy, the proposed plan will end up with, at age 90, at least $1.3 million less in assets. That's a lot of money. Absolutely. Of course, everything about this, would change as they have millions of dollars in their accounts in either of these scenarios. They're going to start living differently. And so anyway, take that with a grain of salt. But it does illustrate something that to get this guaranteed income, to get this peace of mind that comes with knowing that you have a guaranteed income, that you've purchased yourself a guaranteed income in the future, that has a cost. And this is the cost, the potential growth if the market does even average or well. But let's look at what happens when we have these negative scenarios that we're stress testing here. If we have that bad decade, both of them end up running out of money, but it's the one that's fully exposed to the market that runs out sooner. Right? You are in pain here. Now, you wouldn't just let it run out. You would adapt and you would adjust. You would start spending less, and it wouldn't look exactly like this. I get it. These are a lot of just baseline assumptions, but it does help illustrate the point that you're way more exposed to this bad decade if you have everything in the market. So this client was a little bit more insulated from that. Now, their funds lasted them, 5 or 6 more years as far as assets go, but because they were able to turn on that income stream, you can compare, they still had that income, right? So sure, they were asset poor at that point, but they had income. They had guaranteed income that was coming in. So make sure you're weighing that properly. There's two sides of this coin. Which one is more important to you when you're 80 years old in retirement and you're just trying to live your best life at that point? I would love the assets. It would be fine. It would be nice. Provide me with some comfort, but the income's going to be more important to me from a day-to-day perspective. And some people are going to be different. Some people are greater risk takers than these clients were and would rather take the gamble for the upside and risk running out of money earlier and not secure that income because they didn't like what it did to their potential for growth in the future. But let's look at each of these scenarios and you can see that without the annuity, we're running out of money sooner. Especially in this 1989 Japan-like scenario, this would be extremely painful. And if you're working with an advisor, you should have them walk you through a scenario like this. What would your current plan look like if you had this type of reality in your future? What if the next 30 years looked like 1989 Japan in the stock market? How would your portfolio hold up? What would that do? More importantly, what would that do to your retirement, to your peace of mind, to your lifestyle? Just make sure you know the answer to that question. You may be fine with it, but it's important to figure out for yourself. It's important to at least be aware of the things that could happen in your future so that you can prepare accordingly. So that's the alternative here with the 1989 Japan market, that if we have a bad decade and you don't have this income, that you run out of money early and assets earlier. So by switching it to this income scenario, you preserve your assets a little bit longer and you're able to guarantee this income. So it puts you in a much better position compared to the stock and bond only alternative. But then the scenario that I've been skipping over here as we've looked at all this is, what about this strong growth scenario? What if things go really well? Which, as you can imagine, is not as important to me. It's usually not as important to my clients. If we have strong growth, great. The accounts of my clients might be going up in this scenario by less than what their neighbors' accounts are going up by. But they'll still be going up. They'll still be benefiting from it, just benefiting from it less. And so I'd rather explore the downside, because that's the one where there's pain if they're not prepared. I want them to be prepared. On the upside, it might be painful to see that your neighbors are making more money than you. But when I sit down with people and talk with them, most people can acknowledge that it's more important to them to make sure that they're taking care of themselves and their families, their loved ones. Most people, maybe it is one of your life goals to be in a position to capitalize on a historically strong market that might play out in the future. And if that's the case, then yeah, this strategy is not for you. Because yeah, if we switch to this strong growth scenario, Steve and Sally's current position of being 100% in the market and not having, this income annuity piece in there would leave them way more exposed to that potential upside, leaving them with almost $3 million more, again, with all of these historical averages playing out. That's a big deal. It's a big hit to take on the upside by guaranteeing this income. But that's not the goal for most. At least I've never had anyone tell me that they just really want to be able to capitalize on the potential upside of a future historically strong market. Instead, retirees, people preparing for retirement, they want to be sure that they won't run out of money. They don't want to have to stress about it. They want to know that they'll be able to provide for themselves and their loved ones who are depending on them. And that's where this concept of stable lifetime income comes into play. Now, I mentioned risks with annuities, and there absolutely are some. They are not all created equal, and with aggressive annuity salesmen out there, you have to be careful. I've put together a list of 8 things to worry about. Some that I've heard others say, and some that I've found on my own. 4 of them are really misleading, but the rest are legit. You should know them. You should be careful. I break it all down for you in this video. I'll see you there.